how did you manage all the planning? Because you did most of it yourself, and then um, I guess you started asking or requesting for more support, and then we had a couple of dialogues about it because initially um, you were supposed to be planning, and then I wasn't as much, and then you had all these thoughts about, oh, you're not invested, or like all these thoughts start to creep in, which again, I guess we had conversations around it.
Yeah.
So anyway, you're more of a planner. I'm more laid back.
Also, though, like, I think that sometimes I truly lose sight of like the cultural differences in what we would have grown up in and how that would come into play in areas in our lives that you don't necessarily expect them to. So when, like, for example, the wedding planning is like, yes, I was going into it, had no concept of like the sheer volume of like work and coordination, and then budgeting that layered on top of it. And like, I had a binder that I was constantly updating, and like the amount of details involved, and it was a lot to keep track of and to do and to plan independently, because it was just me doing it. And so I didn't need too much from you, but I did feel like when things came up that like I wanted your opinion, or I like wanted to delegate a task to you or stuff like that, like there, you weren't overly engaged in that. And like a lot of that would likely have to do with the fact that like none of the wedding planning stuff would have ever been on your radar in your life. Um but it was frustrating, and like, to be fair, like when I get frustrated or overwhelmed, I'm not the most reasonable person in the world. But I definitely feel like we had some pretty big disagreements of me being like, I am doing all of this by myself, I need your support. And I feel like even when I do get some of your support, you're not completely engaged in it, and that was a challenge.
Yeah, so it was a mix of, I guess, me stepping up a little bit, and then you also understanding where I'm coming from, and I guess we sort of made it work.
Yeah, we got there eventually. I think
Yeah, we
honestly
got
it's
there.
good for a relationship to go through stuff like that, because when there's also like an element of trust of like, I, like you said, I'm a planner and I'm a control freak. I will willingly admit that. And so even delegating tasks completely was really difficult, because there's like a massive element of trust that like you'll do it the way that I want it to be done, which isn't a fair expectation when you're delegating a task in the time frame that, again, I want it done. And like, it felt justified to me at the time, because I also knew all, like, so you're in charge of like porta potties, right? And that can seem relatively simple. But I also knew that when you schedule this, how you're scheduling it, the kind you're scheduling impacts 10 other vendors and their timing and how that all needs to fit together. So it was